morning. My name is Amanda Tipton and I am the Chief Education Consultant for IDPN. And today we're going to be walking through a really simple set of edits in Photoshop. The reason that we're using Photoshop as opposed to some of the more simple programs or less costly programs is simply that it's what I'm familiar with. I will be exploring things like GIMP with you along the way as we get into all of this, but for now, basically anything that you can do in a very simple way in Photoshop, you can do in these more simple programs. So what I'm showing you is more the technique, how it affects the photo as opposed to exactly step-by-step what you can do, because these things are available to you in those other programs. So we have our original photo. This is straight out of camera, and as I look at it, there's some things that I would want to change to really make this photo shine. For one thing, they're very centered in the frame right here, so there's a lot of space up here that just isn't adding to the story at all, and so cutting that out can really help focus the attention back on the bride and groom. There's also this mystery guy over here, and I am against mystery people in pictures. If they're not helping to add to the story, they're just sort of, who is that guy? What's he doing there? So the first thing we're going to do is crop. And this is the crop tool in Photoshop. And you can see up here that it's given us the width, the height, and the resolution. So we definitely want to be around 300 ppi or pixels per inch because we want a good resolution when things get printed. We're doing it in a 2:3 aspect ratio, so basically we want it to be the same shape as it would have come out of the camera. If you're confused at all about aspect ratios, there's another blog post that I'd recommend you look at on the IDPN website about aspect ratios that can kind of help explain that to you. So we're going to keep it at a 2:3 aspect ratio, and I'm just going to pull, come on now, pull the crop tool across to about where I want it to be. Everything else that gets blacked out is what will be gone. Now I notice that they're sort of at an angle, so I'm going to tilt that crop as well and kind of make some decisions about, do I want to keep that curve right there? Do I want to keep these highlights across here? I probably don't. I'm going to pull that in a little bit there. I'm going to make sure that the tops of their heads are pretty much parallel. This line right here is pretty much parallel when I turn it. See how I get this little arrow guy that when I hover by the corners that lets me turn the crop? And like I said, other software may have a different way of allowing you to do that turn, but most of them should let you straighten as well as just crop in. So double click on the image and pull this out a little bit so we can see what's going on. So that's the crop. So if we go back and forth on the history, you can see how getting rid of all of this information really helps draw the focus back to the couple right here. Okay, so next part of this is that to me they seem really dark. I like to see a dark black in an image and a white in an image so that I know that I've got the whole dynamic range of tones, but when looking at their skin tone, it looks like the camera went, oh, this is all black or very, very bright right here, so I don't need to expose quite as brightly on their skin tones. So I'm going to go up to, excuse me, Image, Adjustments, Levels. And what you'll see here, this is basically a bar graph of all of the tones in your image. So if you look here as the amount of black or the amount of white in a tone, you can see there's lots of blacks here, not very many whites, a little spike of white right here, which is probably these lights back here, but other than that, we're not a whole lot in this area. So I'm going to take the white point and I'm going to move it back to about where the graph starts. Because if I go too far, what you'll see is it starts to get blown out over here. She starts to look funny. Sometimes overdoing something will show you where it lives, like where you want to be with it. I'm not sure if that makes any sense at all, but you know, the same kind of thing over here. If I take the darks too far in, I automatically see, oh, that's what happens. So this midpoint deals with where the medium gray is, and so if I raise that a little bit as well, we start to get a lot more of the tone correct throughout there. We're starting to get a little bit more of the mid-grays back in his suit, that kind of a thing. So I'm going to click OK. And again, I'm going to run through the history just so you can see that's where we started from. That's where the levels look now. They look much, much healthier, much more well lit. Okay, so next step for me is that I look at this and go, you know, it's got a nice warm glow from the lights, but I feel like they are too yellow, that their skin tones look a little jaundiced. So I want to do a little work with the yellow cast that we're getting from the indoor light. So I'm going to go back to image. Now you could do an auto color, right? But watch what happens. See how muddy and gray and green that all gets? Basically what happens is it's seeing all of the red in the wood back here and it's going, oh, I have to overcompensate. I have to add a lot of green in order to compensate for all that red. But we want some of the red, we want some of the warmth, and we, you know, don't want them to become swamp monsters. So we're just going to adjust things in the color balance. So it's image adjustments, color balance, and we're going to do it by hand. So I have these sliders, and again, if I go too far with them, you can see what happens. And right now we're just dealing with the midtones, so I see a lot of yellow in their skin, so I'm going to pull the blue, and it only takes a little bit. See how much nicer and pinker they look at that point? But I also feel like there's a lot of red, so I'm maybe going to pull the cyan down just a tiny bit. I'm also going to do it with the shadows to keep the red and the yellow from being too hard in the shadows. Just a little, I mean, little bit. If I take the preview off, you can see how little. So jaundiced skin, healthy looking skin. It's just a tiny change, but it makes a world of difference. So once again, we started from here, then we cropped, then we lightened everything, and then we did the color balance. So at this point, you might decide that you're done. You like it this way, you like all the color, it looks nice and emotional. Most digital images need to be sharpened. If we zoom all the way in, you'll see that, especially in places like the hair, there's technical reasons for why most digital images need to be sharpened, and I don't want to go into the whole thing. So suffice it to say, it will help to sharpen it. You don't want to over sharpen it though, because then they start to look crunchy or pixelated. You just want a nice, crisp, you know, sharp image. So under filter, there is sharpen. And again, you might be tempted to go, oh, sharpen, and we'll let this run. And it does an okay job. You can kind of, that's maybe too far zoomed in. We're starting to get a little bit more in here, but there's not a lot of control over that kind of sharpen. So what I prefer to do is filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. I keep the amount at 100. The radius at 1 pixel and the threshold at 0. So as I click down and let go, you can see the preview is of that amount of sharpening. It's just a little bit more subtle. I have a little bit more control over it. And see, watch, if I take the sharpen off, now watch what happens with all her little hairs. It just gets a little crisper. And so when we zoom back out, it's subtle, and we don't want it to be a big, huge thing. So, but it's important for anything that you intend to print to have that sharpening done. Now, lastly, you might look at this image and go, there's a lot of visual information in the color here. It's a more emotional image. I really want to see this in black and white. And what we'll notice is that it will help pull the focus back to the couple as opposed to, we won't see, you know, the purple on the glasses, this pumpkin, this really, really bright boutonniere. Everything will go back towards that couple. So if I go up to Image, Mode, Grayscale, that's a pretty simple way to make the image black and white. What you need to do is go back and go Image, Mode, RGB Color, because a lot of labs can't deal with an image that's saved in grayscale. It needs to be go back to RGB, which stands for red, green, blue, so that it can be, it won't go through their system, essentially. It has to be an RGB file to go through their system. So we just did, again, grayscale, and then move that back to RGB. But you'll notice that things maybe get muddy again when it is black and white, so we're going to go back to Image, Adjustments, Levels, and see our graph is a little better because we've moved that white point up, so we're not missing all of those light grays that we were before, but it's still kinda light on that end. So I'm going to move this up, and I'm watching what happens in her face in particular. And I'm going to move this up and watch what happens to all the mid-grays. And I'm going to move the black down just to give me a little bit more contrast, especially because I'm starting to see a little pixelation in his collar right there. So I see if I make it really gray, you start to get a little of that just pixelation and things that weren't captured very well. So if we kind of just hide that and make that contrastier, it helps. So this is where we were before we played with the levels. This is where we are after. So it's a really simple fix. It takes you from, you know, something that is kind of ho-hum and it's got so much information that just isn't adding to the picture, to something that's really nice and emotional and has good light, and I'm not so fixated on the pumpkin and all of that sort of thing. It's nice and sharp, all of the levels look good, and it's relatively easy. Once you get this process down, it's, you know, 30 seconds a picture as opposed to, you know, taking hours and hours. It's a very simple thing to do. So good luck with it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.